Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. lead the way for the Memphis Grizzlies on opening night, knocking off the New Orleans Pelicans, who had a double-digit lead in the contest. We're going to talk about how the Pelicans built that lead, how Memphis stormed back, and why Gigi Jackson not entering the contest at all should and shouldn't be a surprise. We'll talk about all that and more on this edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is I, Joe Mullinax, with you on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, a post-Grizz Pelicans edition of the podcast. Thank you so much for being with me wherever you're checking out the show. Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube, Amazon. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe wherever you're checking us out, whenever you're checking us out, however, whoever. Make sure you're making us a part of your NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time that an episode drops. I am so grateful that you do so. I know my partner, DeMichael Cole, also grateful that you do so. Not with me on this edition of the show. He is the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. So he's got some work to do, but I'm happy to be with you for the next 30 minutes or so, and I hope that you'll join me as we go on this ride we like to call Locked On Grizzlies together. And it's going to be a fun one, at least to start the program, because the Grizzlies won, right? It's always good when the Grizzlies pick up the victory for the first time since 2021, as DeMichael pointed out on our Monday edition of the program, I believe. The Grizzlies had both Jaren Jackson Jr. and Ja Morant available to them on opening night, and boy, oh boy, does it make a difference. Ja Morant was exceptional. Should we really be surprised? No, we shouldn't be surprised. Remember that list that I used to talk about, the top 100 list that the Locked On hosts tried to make it seem like Ja Morant was the 28th or so best player in the National Basketball Association? I told you then that it was nonsense. Hopefully you believed me. Hopefully you rode with me on that one, because I look pretty smart sitting here doing this episode of the program. 35 points on 20 shots, 7 of 8 from the charity stripe, 3 assists, 3 rebounds, 1 steal. Ja Morant looked every bit a guy that doesn't have 28 other dudes in the National Basketball Association better than him. He orchestrated the offense. He was a force at the rim. The Pelicans could not stay in front of him. He hit some mid-range jumpers, showing development in his game. 2 for 6 from beyond the arc. 33% for Ja is not the worst thing in the world. Again, if he is respectable out beyond the paint, that is going to do so much for the Grizzlies offense. So Ja Morant looked formidable in his return to the floor. And again, if he was 2 for 6 from 3, that means he was 11 for 14. 11 for 14. 11 for 14 from the 2-point space. That's pretty darn efficient. Then you have Jaren Jackson Jr., who fouled out in the contest. That's going to be a major storyline. I don't care as much about the fouls as I do another component of how the fouls were bad, and we'll talk more about that later on in the show. Fouling out is a problem in 27 minutes of play, not trying to make excuses for Jaren, but I loved how he had 8 rebounds in those 27 minutes. He had double the rebounds of Jock Landale, who we'll talk more about later on in the show as well. Jaren was 7 for 14 from the field. He, too, struggled from 3, 0 for 4 from beyond the arc, but that means Jaren was what? 7 for 10 from inside the three-point line. He and Ja both very efficient scoring. Again, those 8 rebounds I mentioned. 6 blocks is what Jaren was officially credited with via the NBA stat Meister stat guy. 6 blocks, 6 fouls. That's a decent trade-off, right? A 1-to-1 ratio. Isn't that how that works? No, it's not? Okay, fair enough. But Jaren looked good. Ja looked good. Neither of those guys played more than 30 minutes, and yet they made an indelible mark on the contest. So kudos to both of those guys for the way that they performed. I loved how Jalen Wells played, to be honest with you. 4 assists to 2 turnovers. That's a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. I can work with that with somebody that's easing in to a secondary creator of offense role. 4 for 8 from 3. Did not take a single 2-point shot. And you know why I am specifically okay with that? Because Jalen Wells doesn't need to take a 2-point shot when Ja and Jaren are doing the things that they're doing. Ja and Jaren were cooking from inside the 3. That allowed for Jalen Wells to have open looks. I need him to be that spot-up shooter, that secondary passer, the mover of the ball. I'm all well and good with that. Plus, he had a steal, did Jalen Wells. A strong outing for him. He was a plus 11 on the night, one of the best plus minuses individually in the game, and the best among the starters. Ja Morant was a net neutral in plus minus. And again, plus minus, very flawed stat, but it does show how many points were scored or not scored when that player was on the court. Jaren was a plus 5, Jalen Wells a plus 11. So a strong outing for Jalen in that first starting position as the Desmond Bane replacement, in air quotes. Cedric Coward. We got to talk about Cedric Coward. If we're talking about positives, if we're going to have good vibes on this episode of the show, we have to address how Cedric Coward looked off the bench. Cedric Coward off the bench. Maybe that's a topic for a future episode of the show. Not sure how much longer we should say Cedric Coward off the bench in the same sequence of words. Cedric Coward looked like a starter to me, and he provided tremendous energy in his 22 minutes of play. 1 block, 2 steals, 3 rebounds, 14 points on 5 shots. He made all 4 of his 3 throws, all 5 of his shot attempts. The Grizzlies were surprisingly efficient overall offensively. Shot over 51% from the field, 41 for 80 from the field. Took a lot of freaking free throws. There's no complaining about the officiating in this one if you're a Grizzlies fan. The Grizzlies took 43 free throws, making 35 of them. The Grizzlies made more free throws than the New Orleans Pelicans attempted, and that played a massive role in the Grizzlies winning that contest. Cedric Coward was a piece of that. Cedric Coward was the juice. Memphis struggled mightily in the first quarter. The Pelicans built a double-digit lead in the first quarter. The Grizzlies came rolling back, and a major reason for that was Cedric Coward. His presence on the defensive end, his energy, laying out for loose balls later in the contest. He made winning plays. He had that dog in him, as we like to talk about. Oh. And when you got that dog in you, that, unsurprisingly, is infectious in the best way possible. The dog that was in Cedric Coward got loose and allowed for other guys to embrace that energy and that intensity, and he really did a solid job for the Grizzlies, providing that spark off the bench, helping them be reinvigorated. We talked about the plus minus, the imperfect stat. To me, it's reflective of the impact that Cedric Coward had in this game in this particular instance. Plus 24. That means the Grizzlies scored 24 more points than the New Orleans Pelicans did when Cedric Coward was on the court. And if you watch the game, that bears out. Ced doesn't have a stat line that completely blows you away, but he did so many things as a reserve for this Grizzlies team that were desperately needed to help them climb back into the contest. And my last positive that I want to shout out in this edition or this part of the show is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. And it's not because KCP was 2 for 7 from 3. He's got to be better, right? It's not because KCP was 9 for 9 from the charity stripe. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope attempted more free throws than any other member of the Memphis Grizzlies. That's kind of surprising. You don't expect that from a 3-and-D wing. Where I want to give KCP his props is on a particular play, a play in which he did make one of those threes. But it's not the fact that he made the 3 that caught my eye. It was an opportunity in transition that Javon Small and Cedric Coward were rushing down the court, excited, looking for a chance to attack the rim or to make some sort of play. But Kentavious Caldwell-Pope gets the ball in his hands, and he resets the offense. He calms things down. He's a steadying presence, helps them get into the positions they're supposed to be in. A screen and roll is set. KCP pulls up and hits the 3. I don't expect many pull-up off-the-bounce threes from Kentavious Caldwell-Pope as an initiator of offense this season. So while it was cool that the 3 went in, that's not what I'm most excited about. I'm excited about the veteran presence of that guy. I'm excited about how he was able, in that space, in that spot, to step up and move forward for the team, calm the energy, turn down the temperature, and allow for a good offensive look as opposed to a rush one. Just because you want to play with pace and you want to play quickly does not mean that that is always the right decision. We're going to talk more about that here momentarily on the show. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, not just in that circumstance, but in numerous situations throughout the game, showed his veteran presence, his savvy, the type of leadership that he can provide. He's not the leader. Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., they're the leaders. But you can show leadership and be in a position of leadership without being the leader. And I think that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is going to pay dividends both immediately and in the long term for this Grizzlies team, given the way that he competes. Not always going to make threes, not always going to be the best player on the court. He'll never be the best player on the court. But as long as he's a role player that does what he's supposed to do and emulates that and helps these younger players learn, he's going to be worth his contract and then some for the Grizzlies. Let me know in the comments. Hit me up on X at Joe Mullinax. Who do you think deserves the most credit for the Grizzlies win? Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr. Maybe you're high on Cedric Coward like me. Let me know in the comments. Hit me up on X. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we are going to talk about where the Grizzlies need to clean things up. It wasn't a perfect performance by any stretch of the imagination. That'll be our focal point when we come back. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Mint Mobile. If you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. I said yes to making the switch and getting premium wireless for just $15 a month. Mint makes it simple. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can even bring your own phone and keep your same number in contacts. The setup is super easy. You keep your number and it gets running in minutes, and then you have the same quality service that you had before for the fraction of the price. Are you ready to say yes to saying no? Make the switch at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by Rugiet. I love me some Rugiet, and you should as well. Let's be honest. Let's be real. Making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress. I'm tired. It happens to everybody sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body needs a little extra support, and that's where Rugiet comes in. It offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. It makes it easy to get started. You connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, no awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments, and if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. The process is fast, simple, and private. It's all handled by real doctors. It's about confidence, connection, and getting back to the moments that matter in life. Visit rugiet.com/LockedOnNBA to get 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com/LockedOnNBA, and don't forget to use our code LockedOnNBA so that they know that we sent you. Rugiet, stop making excuses and start making moves. I think that's a good idea, and you should definitely get in on the fun. The Grizzlies win, so you certainly don't want to harp on the negative too much. You want to be happy. You want to be pleased. You want to say good job, especially the way the preseason went. Right? The preseason went very poorly. If you are an everydayer at Locked On Grizzlies, you know that I was not a huge fan of how the team handled the preseason. I still think that those choices reared their ugly head in this contest. For example, the slow start, the fact that the Pelicans, I think it was 24-9 at one point, 25-9, something like that. New Orleans got out to a pretty big lead, and it looked like it was going to be a really long night for Memphis. Thankfully, they woke up. The second unit came in, played with some energy, played with some aura, as the kids say, and they sparked the contest, and it was a 3-point game by the end of the first quarter, so much more manageable, of course. They went on a run and countered what the Pelicans were trying to do. But it shouldn't have gotten to that place, and one of the reasons that it got to that place was a problem throughout the entire game, and that was turnovers. I am very, 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 very anti-turnover. If you're an everydayer of Locked On Grizzlies, you know it to be true. I don't like this idea of playing with speed for the sake of speed. I think it's a problem, and I think that Memphis is going to pay for it on more nights than they won't pay for it. And this was one of those nights where they almost paid for it, to be honest with you. The Grizzlies had entirely too many turnovers. 17 turnovers, 12 of them were in the first half. 12 turnovers in the first half, and friendly reminder, what was going on for Memphis in the first half? They were losing. They were struggling. The Pelicans had the lead. Then, for the remainder of the game, literally in the second half, only 5 turnovers for the Grizzlies. Memphis preserves possessions, and that puts them in a position to actually, score the basketball. You can't score if you lose the ball. And this concept of pace for the sake of pace, I'm not a fan of it. I don't give a darn what the Indiana Pacers did. I don't care how the Grizzlies improved their offense last year. The Pacers are a team that have Tyrese Halliburton, a top 15 player in the NBA. Pascal Siakam, another top player in the NBA, one of the deepest benches in the NBA. It's the Jimmy and Joes more often than it's the X's and O's. And you can be appreciative of what a team does offensively, how they execute, the way that they attack the game of basketball. But if you don't have the clientele and the personnel that allows for you to do those similar things at an efficient level without turning the ball over at an extremely high rate, if the Grizzlies had kept their pace going back to the first half, and if the Grizzlies had turned the ball over 24 times instead of 17, those are 7 possessions that the Grizzlies don't get some of those free throws that we talked about earlier in the game. Those are possessions that the Pelicans get extra chances to score. And it was the Pelicans who had timely mistakes happen for them that led to them struggling. It was the Pelicans who missed opportunities late in the contest to tie or to build a lead because of decisions they were making with the ball. So turnovers will remain a major issue for the Grizzlies. Turnovers and rebounds. You'll hear DeMichael talking a lot about rebounding and his concerns around the bigs. I'm going to continue to focus on turnovers because it is nonsensical to me to say that losing chances to score the ball is okay in the sake of pace or in the name of pace. Over the span of an 82-game season, maybe that's true to an extent. Maybe the numbers will bear that out. But it's not going to be true in an individual contest when your shot isn't falling at the rate that the Grizzlies was, and the Pelicans are able to make you pay for the way that you are not protecting the basketball. As high as I was on Jaren Jackson Jr., the Defensive Player of the Year candidate, making a return, those 6 blocks that I talked about earlier in the show, he had way too many turnovers and way too many fouls. And some of those fouls doubled up as turnovers. I think it was 3 or 4 offensive fouls. And that means that you have to, if you're Jaren, adjust to the way that the officials are calling the game. You have to understand that they're not allowing for you to set the screen the way you want it to, or you're being too aggressive. You're using your arms more than your lower body to set positioning in the post. Whatever the case might be, the leverage that you're trying to establish, it's not being done in a legal manner in the eyes of the officials. The screen that you're trying to set to create space for the guy that you're operating with in the 2-man game or off ball as you're trying to free up a shooter on the perimeter in some sort of screen action, you have to set your feet and you can't lean into it. There are certain things that going into your 7th or 8th NBA campaign, you should understand how the National Basketball Association works when it comes to those kinds of plays. So Jaren continued to have fouls that put him in positions where he wasn't able to play, or Tuomas Isalo chose to not play him as much as perhaps he would have otherwise. Jaren's the second best player on the team. The Grizzlies are going to need Jaren Jackson Jr. as the schedule toughens up over the next several weeks to be on the court for an extended period of time to get his full allotment of minutes, whatever that rotation is from Tuomas Isalo. I'm guessing 27 minutes is not what the plan is for Jaren moving forward. Santi Aldama had a really rough night, and that's concerning because the Grizzlies just signed him to a big contract extension, right? They made the choice to keep Santi in the fold. Santi scores 5 points in 24 minutes of play. That ain't going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. Olivier Maxence-Prosper, OMP, scoring more points or double the points than Santi Aldama, that is not sustainable. That is not a model for success for this Grizzlies team moving forward. And I love OMP. But Santi is the guy that has to be that scoring threat. He's the guy with Ty Jerome out in particular that has to be the walking bucket, that has to be someone offensively that a defense has to account for in those rare times where Ja and Jaren are both not on the floor. Santi has to be that offensive engine. And you didn't see it consistently. The Pelicans almost didn't respect him. They weren't worried about him in that space, and Santi didn't command that respect through his actions and the way that he was moving about the court. Seemed, I don't want to say disinterested, but he seemed like he wasn't ready to play on this particular night, in this particular contest. So Santi Aldama could have been better. Jaren Jackson Jr., as strong as he played in some ways, could have been better in others. I'm going to close this out with Jock Landale. Jock Landale had 4 rebounds in 25 minutes. He fouled out. If Jock Landale is not going to rebound, and if Jock Landale is not setting the best screens, allowing for positioning to be established, the 2 reasons that he was allegedly signed by the Grizzlies in the first place, why is he playing? Let me know in the comments. Hit me up on X. Why is Jock Landale playing if he is not going to be what the Grizzlies need him to be? Now, he got more comfortable as the game went on. That is important to point out. But to foul out in 25 minutes with only 4 rebounds while a guy who is not a strong rebounder, Jaren Jackson Jr., doubles you up in that category, why can't Jaren just play the 5? And you get more athletic out on the perimeter. You put a Cedric Howard in that spot, for example. That would be my preference, but we'll talk more about that on a later episode. of Locked On Grizzlies. Hit me up on X. Let me know in the comments. What are you thinking needs to be cleaned up? Are you worried about the turnovers like me? Are you a rebounds guy like DeMichael? Is Santi concerning? Jaren will get going, but the fouls have been a thing for his entire career, essentially, right? Hopefully it doesn't become a thing in this season. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to close out this episode of the show. Very excited to do so. Talking about a very interesting situation that may or may not be developing in Memphis. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. Don't go anywhere. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Skims. Ooh, Skims is one of my very favorite reads and groups to do work with through Locked On podcasts. When I found out that Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about the quality from friends and family. I had to give it a try, and let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear: fit, comfort, finding the right style for me. Skims changes all of that. Their men's line offers something for everybody, from boxer briefs to classics, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. I liked the 5-inch boxer brief that I tried. I'm hooked to it. They're perfect for my active lifestyle, moving with me, never losing shape, staying in place all day long. Whether I'm working out, running errands, whatever the case might be, they are the most comfortable and reliable underwear I have ever owned. Plus, the lightweight material feels amazing, almost like you're wearing nothing at all. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com and let them know that we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Go and check out Skims today. What are you waiting for? Go do it. This is Joe Mullinax closing out this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. As we've talked about before, these episodes will publish in the next hour to 2 hours post-game, whenever the Grizzlies especially are at home. DeMichael, of course, my co-host, DeMichael Cole, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal, will more often than not be on the ground in Memphis at FedEx Forum, will not be available for the show. I'll do the home games. DeMichael will do a lot of the away games. Like, spoiler alert, I'm not staying up late next week for the West Coast swing. So those will be DeMichael episodes, safe to say. This is a Joe Mullinax and you, my dear viewer, dear listener episode. And we're going to close out today talking about Gigi Jackson. Okay. And I have it listed here as the Gigi Jackson dilemma. I don't want to get it twisted. Okay. I'll tell you a secret. Come closer. Come a little bit closer. Look me in the eye. Put your ear up to the phone or the speaker. If you're here's my secret. Gigi Jackson is not particularly good at basketball right now. Or at the very least, he's not good at team basketball. Because now we have 2 head coaches. Taylor Jenkins, who was fired over the summer, if you don't remember, or not even in the summer, it was last season, right? You have Taylor Jenkins, and now you have Tuamasi Isolo that have made a choice. They have chosen to play the likes of Cam Spencer, and they have chosen to play the likes in particular of John Conchar over Gigi Jackson. Now, John Conchar is white rice. That is the comparison I have made involving his game. Yes, he keeps the ball moving. He understands scheme. You put spicier, more interesting ingredients around him, and he accentuates. Sure. He's white rice. John Conchar is not going to kill you, but he's also not raising your ceiling. I would argue he's not even necessarily raising your floor. He's just kind of there. He's white rice. Gigi Jackson has the skill set to raise your ceiling. Gigi Jackson has the frame to be a 4-man or a 3-man. He has the footwork. He has the scoring capacity. He has all the potential in the world. And yet now we have 2 coaches that have refused to play him. And the question has to become why. Because my irrational disdain for John Conchar, push that aside. How many other guys, players on 2-way contracts, got the opportunity to get minutes in an NBA basketball game against the Pelicans on opening night before Gigi Jackson? 2. OMP and Javon Small, right? The Small plays the point, but OMP plays a similar position to Gigi, and he got that opportunity. He got those minutes. Why is that? Because Gigi Jackson simply is not doing the things that he needs to do to show that he can be a team contributor. On the defensive end, we saw that last year, right? He was one of the worst defensive players in the entire National Basketball Association. So if he has not made tremendous strides in that space, a head coach, especially a first-year head coach, is not going to trust that guy. Offensively, we know that Gigi Jackson can score the rock. We've seen that time and time again. But can Gigi Jackson pass it? Can Gigi Jackson make the read that's the right play? Now, in fairness to Gigi, His namesake, Jaren Jackson Jr., also struggles with this concept. There were a couple of times those turnovers we were talking about earlier in the show. Jaren's in the post is one of the best isolation scorers in the league, especially for a big, and teams are collapsing on him, right? A wing and a big collapsing in the post around Jaren. Jaren a couple of times made the pass out. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope made his other three in the game off of one of those passes. But at the same time, there were times where the ball got ripped away from him because he's not comfortable or he's not willing, whatever the case might be, to make that extra pass out of the post when he's getting double teamed consistently. GG doesn't pass really at all, right? At least not consistently. And a coach has to be able to trust that you're going to make that read and you're going to make that call and you're going to create offense, not just for yourself, but for others. And GG Jackson has not displayed that, not in preseason, not in the work that he did in the summer league. At no point can you look at GG Jackson and say on a nightly basis you can count on him to be a neutral team defender that doesn't kill you on that end of the court and an offensive player that has the capacity to not just create for himself, but for others. The other guys, Javon Small can create for himself and for others. OMP is going to be able to play that team defensive scheme, at least better than GG. John Conchar is a combination of the two. So while I may not play John Conchar, I may not see the value in putting White Rice out there ahead of GG Jackson, I can understand why an NBA coach would do so. But you've got one of the youngest, most talented players in the league, even entering his third season with the NBA. He is somebody that the Grizzlies have to continue to figure out what they've got in him. And if they don't like what they've got in him, as we approach the trade deadline, and Memphis perhaps is in the mix a little more than they thought they'd be, as the team gets healthy, maybe GG is somebody that you attach to make a trade for a veteran on a tanking or losing team that will help you in the here and now because GG Jackson is no longer helping you in the here and now. You're in year 3. GG's still young, but you have to be able to utilize him. And you are making conscious choices as a coaching staff to go in a different direction than GG Jackson. Is GG Jackson a part of the Memphis Grizzlies' future or not? He wasn't a part of the present. And a lot of people would make the argument that's in the best interest of the Memphis Grizzlies, including the folks that have that direct connection to choosing whether or not he plays. So does GG have the bandwidth? Does he have the maturity? Does he have the capacity to go out there and get better in the reps that he's given, in practice when they practice? The season's officially started now. We have a back-to-back coming up this weekend. The Grizzlies aren't going to be practicing much for the next several days. So will GG in shoot-arounds, will GG pregame and his individual work, will he be able to, in film, however the Grizzlies are interacting the next several days, how does he earn those minutes? How does he earn that burn? How does he show that he is a better fit, not just a better talent, than a John Conchar, Cam Spencer, or an OMP? It's on GG to figure that out at this point. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It is much appreciated. Our next episode will drop on Friday. Potentially me and DeMichael, potentially just DeMichael. We'll be talking the home and home back-to-back coming up. I believe Miami Heat are going to be a part of that process for the Grizzlies. That'll be fun. So we'll talk about that. The Grizzlies gotta get into a groove on the defensive end. It was not the most impressive defensive showing for the Memphis Grizzlies against the Pelicans. That is also a topic that I'm sure that we can cover on our next edition of the show to close out this week. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, and thanks for making us your first listen. Now you need to go and check out Locked On Fantasy Basketball for your second listen with our boy Josh Lloyd. He runs the #1 fantasy basketball podcast, giving you daily tips and helping you with your league, winning your league while making you a smarter NBA fan. Find Locked On Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube. Make sure that you are becoming an everydayer, hanging out with myself and or DeMichael Cole whenever an episode drops. Make us a part of your NBA or Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time that an episode drops. And stay around. Be a friend. Hit us up in the comments. Let us know what's going on. Let me know on X, at Joe Mullinax, how your day's going, how you like the show. Be a part of the conversation in our lovely little corner of the internet that we have to call Locked On Grizzlies. For my partner, not with us on this episode, to Michael Cole, I am Joe Mullinax. We'll catch you next time here on Locked On Grizzlies. 1-0, 82-0, still possible.